welcome to the second class of, of this Found class series. Hi, my name is Alana. I am a life coach, and the goal of this class, these series of classes, is actually finding out who you are. Last week, we spoke about how finding yourself is important. Why is it important? And one of the examples that we had was through finding yourself, you find a way to defend yourself during hard times. You make yourself less susceptible to outside influence, outside manipulations. Through finding yourself, you actually are able to make key decisions based off of what you want to do, what benefits you rather than what benefits others as a whole. The end of last class, I did mention for you to find two personality tests to go and see about your personality. Now, I know not everybody has gone out to find that personality test, so we're not going to get into it right this second. But right now, we're going to talk about you. What you consider you, your thoughts, your ideas, your personality, all of those thoughts, ideas, habits that you have are all based off of who you are. Now, would you believe that the majority of those things that you believe, those things that you see who you are not yours? That you don't carry the hopes and dreams of yourself necessarily. You carry the hopes and dreams and expectations of your family, your friends, your society, of how they see how you should live your life. That you have adopted these expectations that others had for you to live your life where you are right now. I can hear you thinking, okay, that sounds crazy. That being with yourself, that you know who you are. I didn't pick up other things around you. I find it so interesting when looking towards a big goal, such as if you're looking towards saving $100,000, or if you're looking to start a business. One of the first things that coaches and other gurus on this app tell you to do is to surround yourself with others who are going after the same thing. Now, the reason why they say that is because you are influenced by the expectations of those around you. If you are trying to save $100,000, being around a bunch of people who are broke, who continually spend money, is not going to encourage you to save that $100,000. If you're going to start a business, being around people who are also starting businesses or have their own businesses gives you that encouragement, their expectation, because you are in their circle to go for that business. It is a community that lifts you up. Now, we're going to start with dissecting who we are and how our outside influences have shaped us. Now, like all things, we go back to when we were children. Because as children, the first people who influence us are our parents, our caregivers. Have you ever heard the saying, money doesn't grow on trees? Many people have heard of this saying, and many of us may have even heard our own parents say that. Our parents are our first influencers on our life. Our parents are the ones who influence what social status we enter this world called life. We inherit what lessons they have learned from their life. And they try to impart those lessons that they learned onto their children. Now, those lessons can be good lessons, and they can be not so good lessons. A person can try to protect their child from a heartache, a difficulty in life that they themselves has faced, but still give the wrong impression. I'll start with something taken from my own life. Both of my parents had significant financial hardship when they were younger. They really went, both of them, around the same time in their development. They went from middle to upper middle class to poor, all with a death in their family. And as children, they internalized that and saw how difficult it was for their parents to get through that difficult financial time. And they had difficulty as children moving through that stage. So that when they had their child, me, they did not want me to have that difficulty. So they wanted me to not feel that money was frivolous. Even though they were both working, they both had good jobs. Neither one of them had any medical situations going on. But they had this sense around money. And they didn't want their children to rely on that money. And when I say rely that money, meaning that, money will always come in, that it wasn't something to be frivolously passed out. Like I said earlier, that saying, money doesn't grow on trees, is often given as an example of a saying that your parents would hear. would tell their child if they wanted a toy that was too expensive. Well, money doesn't grow on trees. Well, for me, I never heard that saying, to be quite honest. For me, my parents had a different saying. They would say, if I reached for a particular doll or a particular toy that was very expensive in their eyes, they would say, oh no, we can't have that. We're poor. This was a consistent message that was brought to me and brought to me as I was growing up. This is an influence that got into my psyche, into how I perceived myself in the world through my first influence, my parents. We're poor. I'm poor. So as I moved through school and I moved through education, regardless of other things that may have happened, trips that we may have gone, things that we did, there was always a lingering thought, a lingering identifier for me as being poor. I hope this is a good example of how your first influencers on your life, your parents, can start influencing on how you feel about yourself. What I want you to do is take out a sheet of paper, and on that sheet of paper, I want you to write all the different sayings or beliefs that your parents have, your caregiver has. And I want you to write them all out on a list. Write them out. If it's not a saying, maybe it's a particular affinity for. Do they like certain things, a certain football team or sports team? Just write them all out. And when you're done writing that list, I want you to read that list. How many of those things that you clearly know your parents like, what your parents believe, you have taken on? Think about it. For the majority of us, when you read that list that you have written out, you'll see that more than 2/3, maybe even 99% of everything you wrote down, sayings that your parents and your caregivers have given you, beliefs that they have, you have inherited. Now, we've just completed the first circle of people who influence you on who you are. Now we're going to go to the next level of influence, your friends. Who were your friends? How did they influence you? You see, in our first circle of influence, of expectation, you have your caregiver, your parent. But then we go to school, we get socialized. And so we see the direct people around us, our friends, the teachers. I want you to think about your best friend in school. It could be elementary school, it could be your best friend during middle school, high school. And I want you to write out, what were they like? What did they like? You see, us as humans, we love being part of a group. We love, we're in more, what word am I looking for? Some scientific circles would say we're much like herd animals. We feel protected in a group. How many times do you remember being in a group of friends at school or at a extracurricular activity, and everyone wanted to do one thing and you wanted to do another, but you changed your mind because, hey, you didn't want to be alone? Were your friends, go back to that list that I first talked about and think about what your friends, your best friends, looked like. Were they of a certain ethnicity? Were they, did they all come from a same background as you did? Or were they from a different background, different economic class, a different social class? Or were they the same? You see, our friends influence on what we believe. For me, using myself as an example, my friends were very similar in some respects. I found that my best friends sort of straddled this interesting line between tradition and modern, between two worlds. Many times these two worlds were represented by people who were bilingual, or their parents were from two different countries, or they straddled the line between two different classes. It was this duality that I found in just about all of my friends. The duality of, even the duality of people who come from a very affluent background, but also happen to hang around and understand other people who weren't from the same affluent background. So I found that that was the balance, that was the through line through all of my friends. That each person held this duality about them. Just like we did in the first list, let's look at that second list. And I want you to write out all those things that you remember about your friend group and see if there's any common strings with it. Just like I just mentioned, there was a duality amongst all my friends. There may be something different with yours. Maybe all of your friends were from the same social class. Maybe they all played music. Maybe all of them were rebels and tried to rebel against their parents, or they always tried to rebel against society. Find that through line. And for the last circle that I want to talk about is the society circle. Society as a greater whole. This is how people who don't know you treat you. As a minority, this cycle affects you so much in so many ways you may not even understand. For me, the way society has expectations for you also sink into your conscience of who you are. So how does society do that? And it's very simple. We see it every day on television, on social media, on this site. It's through stories. It's through the news. The images that are brought to you of those people who look like you, who you identify as. Through the people that you see and the stories that you relate to that remind you of your other layers of influence. Like your first layer, your parents, your caregivers, or they remind you of your second layer, your friends. This is sometimes how society sees you can be very different from how your friends see you and see the expectations of you, and how your family, your caregivers see you. And it can be at odds with each other. And we can take those expectations in from society. Now, once again, I'm going to ask you to take out a list, write out a list, and write stereotypes of what you see in media about you, about people who look like you, about people you relate to, and just write them down. Maybe you relate to a lot of things of people being a hopeless romantic. You love romance. You love romance books. You love love. You love falling in love. You consume a lot of media through that because you relate to it, because there's images of you in society that you relate to, that you love. So you took that identity onto you. Maybe you realize what you see in society is negative, that people who look like you, or people that you can identify as part of you, part of your two other circles, your inner circle of your family and your parents, and your outer circle of your friends and of your friends. Maybe the society outlook on you is negative. And that can be very damaging in terms of how you see yourself, because it can be at odds with it. So as you look at that list of of how society sees you, take a good look at it. Do you agree with everything that was on that list? Do you act in certain ways of how society sees you? So now we have the three lists. We have the list of your parents and your caregivers, the list of your friends, and the list of your society. What these three lists show you is who you are. Now, for the most part, we have taken on these expectations, these idealized forms of ourselves unconsciously. We've taken them unconsciously, and to get through the world as easy as we could, we took them on and we moved through it. Now that you see these lists, now is the real question. Do you believe them all? What contradicts each other? Do you want to keep the contradiction? Because this is a moment in time where you can find who you are and truly define it. No longer taking on the expectations, the automatic, I'm losing words here, y'all. You're no longer taking on the manipulation of others, how they see you. You're no longer taking things from the inside. You are truly choosing it now. Now that you have it written out on a piece of paper, you can choose what you believe. I want to thank you for those of you that are here today. Once again, my name is Alana. And next week, we're going to talk about some parts of ourselves that are hidden. Now, once again, we do have a little bit of homework. What I want you to do between now and the next Sunday, I want you to take a personality test. Now, there's many personality tests out there. The one I personally love is the Myers-Briggs test. But if you don't want to take the Myers-Briggs, that's perfectly all right. There's also another personality test called the Big Five. Just Google them up and take the free test. If you go to a website and they're asking you to pay a certain amount of money for a test, I'm not about that. Take the free test. And then next class, we're going to talk about what you may have found out about yourself by taking these personality tests. All right? So I look forward to seeing you next week for my third class in the Found series. Thank you. Bye-bye.